This is something that I have been wanting to talk about on the show for at least a couple of weeks now, but I held off on it because I wanted to get closer to the date of the release of this movie. This movie is called Conclave. It comes out on the 25th of October, and it is basically hate mail to all Christians from Hollywood. Yours truly, Hollywood. And this is not entirely surprising. We've talked about this on the show before, the way that Hollywood just seems to have it out for Christians. They are always portrayed in media in the most unflattering and, in fact, sometimes demonizing light. But not just that, it's the tenets of our faith and the aesthetics of our faith being commandeered and subverted for the purposes of spreading filth and degeneracy in these projects. We talked about Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney. That was another example of it. But it's just non-stop. I could go on, but Conclave is the most recent example of this. So I'm going to read a description of it. This says, Conclave follows one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting the new pope. Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes, is tasked with running this covert process after the unexpected death of the beloved pope. Once the Catholic Church's most powerful leaders have gathered from around the world and are locked together in the Vatican halls, Lawrence uncovers a trail of deep secrets left in the dead pope's wake, secrets which could shake the foundations of the church.
You know what this sounds like?
What does it sound like?
Sounds like they took the game Assassin's Creed and said, okay, but make it Catholic. Like, that's what this sounds like.
Only,
I mean,
if only that were
Assassin's
true.
Creed Brotherhood is Catholic. Like, it is the Pope is the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I see the first review I see here from a critic at New York Magazine calls it sinfully entertaining. So we already know what we're getting into here. Let's watch the trailer, which also doesn't tell you what it's about, but we're going to watch it anyway.
Ow.
Let's see.
I hit my leg.
You okay?
It's fine.
The Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
Oh.
What happened? They say a heart attack.
You know how rumor spreads, and 1.25 billion souls watching.
Well gotten, no, Lawrence. It seems the responsibility for the conclave falls upon you. The supervision of this election. This is a duty I never thought I'd have to perform. They are sequestered, and they must be shielded from all news that may influence their judgment. You understand? No sane man would want the papacy. The men who are dangerous are the ones who do want it. That sounds ominous. I wonder if I could have a word in private.
It obviously looks great.
It does look like a good movie.
How has this been kept a secret for so long? We'll never find a candidate who doesn't have any kind of black mark against them.
Although we sisters are supposed to be invisible, God has nevertheless given us eyes and ears.
You should be careful, Thomas.
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side.
There is one sin which I have come to fear above all others. Certainty. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery. And therefore no need for faith.
So I believe that character you just saw is in the part of Cardinal Lomeli, who is overseeing the papal conclave. To simplify the story for you, It starts with the Pope dying, and they have to conduct a conclave of cardinals to elect a new pope. And it just looks like a really interesting trailer, doesn't it? But they don't tell you what it's really about.
Even the Wikipedia page doesn't tell you what it's about.
It's trying to bait and switch people. That's what I think. So I looked into it further, and actually I do recommend watching a video that Ben Shapiro released about this, because he read the book that this is based on. I have not, but I'm going to go as closely as I can based on the plot of that book by Robert Harris. It was published in 2016. So it says this Cardinal Benitez gets elected Pope by fulfilling the 2/3 majority vote requirement in the movie. And this cardinal consents to the honor, chooses the name of Innocent the 14th in the movie. Just before the results of the conclave gets publicly revealed, however, it's brought to Cardinal Lomelli's attention that Cardinal Benitez, the new pope, had booked and later abandoned an appointment at a gender reassignment clinic earlier that year. Just what the fuck? Okay, so Cardinal Lomelli privately asks Cardinal Benitez for an explanation, and the new pope reveals that he was born intersex and raised as a male by his parents. For most of his life, he was entirely unaware that his physical characteristics were different in any other way from other males. It was only after he was injured in a bombing in Iraq that he was examined by a doctor for the first time in his life and informed of his condition. Benitez tried to resign from his office to undergo gender reassignment surgery, but the late pope refused his resignation and created him cardinal with full knowledge of his intersex condition, which in real life would not happen. Benitez ultimately declined surgery and resumed his duties. Cardinal Lomelli knows that Benitez's secret will inevitably be discovered by future medical examination or upon his death, but resolves to cover it up for now, trusting that God's will guided the conclave's outcome. So technically, I've seen a lot of people saying this is a movie about the church electing a transgender pope. That's not what it's about, technically, but it might as well have been. And it's intentionally obfuscating, it's intentionally complex and convoluted so that people can't talk about this for what it is.
Without getting into the whole culture war issues that are obvious here, how many people on this planet would you say are actually medically intersex?
I can look it up right now.
Look it up.
It's
Let's see.
Very small percentage.
So,
and even then, the percentage of them that ever find out is much lower.
Right.
And the percentage of them that you could even visibly tell from the outside is very low.
So the reason I ask that, and you please, look up the number, because you are taking a huge risk here. If you're making a movie for an audience that is a fraction of a fraction.
I'm looking at the percentage right now. It says 0.018%. This estimate,
so 1/10 of a percent,
is based on the precise definition of intersex, restricted to conditions where chromosomal sex is inconsistent with phenotypic sex. Essentially,
because you can have like XXY and present as I think fully female.
The Cardinal Benitez character, who was seeking gender reassignment surgery, is in the book, and I assume as well in the movie, genetically female, XX chromosomes.
So, so if you'd say 8 billion people on this planet, and you multiply it by that percentage, you'll get roughly 160 million people. So at most, this is the largest your audience. Like that's at most.
Well, here's what you're not understanding,
that's insane.
Kelly.
Like that,
they're not making this movie for intersex people. This movie isn't for intersex people or even LGBT
I'm kind of
people
giving
in
them
general.
the benefit of the doubt here.
This movie is for people who hate Christianity.
Okay.
And more specifically, it's for people who hate the Catholic Church. And a lot of people in Hollywood absolutely despise the Catholic Church, especially the ones who were raised in it, hate it, And they use their position of influence in the creative field to spread their hatred for the Catholic Church to the rest of the population.
Let's put that aside for a moment. And like, so even if that wasn't the case and they were just truly trying to make a good movie here, your audience is in the whole world at max is 160 million people. That is not good. Like, you're making such a niche movie. For why? Like, is this just a passion project? Are you just okay with it?
It is a passion project. They have a passionate hatred.
So, but my point is like, you're probably right. But even if you were like, hey, no, Hollywood doesn't hate Catholics. Okay, then who are they making this movie for? People, like, they're not going to make money.
People who hate their dads.
This movie's not going to make them money.
About it, yes. Because obviously, in the Catholic worldview, priests are fathers spiritually to their flock, their congregation, the church at large. And that weird Freudian fixation, like, screw you, dad, definitely jumps out in a context like this. I see it in so many examples, and I'm so beyond sick of Hollywood drawing upon the influence of the Catholic Church and just Christianity in general in order to disrespect it, in order to defile it, in order to alienate Christians, who, by the way, make up a majority still of this country.
Because Hollywood, it's not that they, yes, but the reason for it is because they want to become the church. Hollywood, the major studios, the major players, they want to fill that void that hopefully they're hoping to create by trashing the Catholic Church. That's what it is. It's like how the average person treats the president as their god nowadays. I think we're the most.
And we have people writing
I forget what the
fiction
stat
about Tim
is,
Walls.
but people have never been more non-religious in this country than
disgusting.
ever.
We're still one of the most Christian countries on earth too, which is terrifying.
Yeah. So it's like they're creating this void, and they hope to step into it, right? You're worshiping the A-list actors and producers and the presidents and the politicians, not your hometown mayor that's really working, their ass off, but AOC, right? And that's what it is. And that's what it is. And they want to step into that position of power.
Another example of a recent or upcoming project from Hollywood is from Warner Brothers. Baz Luhrmann, the director of the Elvis biopic starring Austin Butler, is reportedly working on a movie about Saint Joan of Arc. So this is confirmed to Deadline last month. Baz Luhrmann's next feature film will be one he's calling Jeanne d'Arc. It is an epic story about Joan of Arc, the young French peasant who believed God had sent her to lead an army. She believed she would save her country during the 100 Years' War. The casting breakdown is going out today, seeking a young female in, quote, the ultimate teenage girl coming of age story set in the 100 Years' War.
Movies like that they don't do well. They tried to do Rapunzel, where she was this like action star. So instead of Rapunzel being saved, she's like knows kung fu and fights her way out of the tower. I don't know I forget what the movie was called, but they tried this already, and it doesn't work.
Well, so I will say, Luhrmann is the guy behind Elvis.
Yes.
And from what I understand, Elvis was a pretty solid movie that stuck to the facts for the most part.
I never watched it. I only watched the Priscilla movie by Sofia Coppola, but
if we're talking about a coming
I heard
of
good
age,
things, sure.
If we're talking about a coming of age movie, it's not a woman going around fighting, right? It's a woman learning about who she is on the inside and developing relationships with the world around her. That's what girls want to see with a coming of age movie. Now, if it was about a guy, maybe it'd be a different story.
It's not a relatable teenage girl coming of age story, because Joan of Arc like literally talked to God and was living in a time where a 14-year-old was much different than what you know as a current day 14-year-old.
They try to make it relatable. And there's
to recast her in a modern light, especially with the amount of academic speculation that has occurred about Joan of Arc possibly being LGBT or a feminist icon.
She might have been schizophrenic.
I cannot trust
it's a big point of contention in the Catholic
Hollywood
Church.
with this. I cannot trust them with this. They will F it up. And I saw just a week before that report came to deadline, Jenna Ortega reveals her dream character to play from history is Joan of Arc.
Too small, I think.
And I'm like,
She's also
No.
too dark-skinned for it.
well, a lot of
Oh,
people
she's
assumed
French. It could work.
when I objected to this.
Joan of Arc is typically depicted as being very pale-skinned with black
she was
hair.
definitely fair-skinned and white. But when I objected to this, a lot of people assumed it was about a race swap. It's not just about a race swap. It's just stay away from this historical figure in general. Like, please just leave leave well enough alone.
This goes back to what I was saying in the first segment. It's like the biggest thing that upsets me is the laziness. Because people, or lack of creativity, however you want to describe it, because they can't come up with their own stories about a young female warrior, they have to change history because the story's already written. And they can't just completely rip it off. They need to add their stamp, their mark on it. They need to let people know that, hey, I was responsible for this art. So they have to change it in a way. And then you get this, where they just take historical stories that have been around forever and they make slight changes so it's different enough and they put it through. And you can call it laziness, you can call it a lack of creativity, but that's the most upsetting part about all of this to me. It's just like there's no one's willing to take a risk. And changing historical facts is not a risk, in my opinion.
Well, we don't know that they changed historical facts on this one yet.
Well, we'll have to find out. But what I'm saying is my hopes are not high.
Oh, I don't have high hopes either, but I will say this. I feel like in the history of movies that are about Christians that attempt to portray Christianity as bad while using Christian characters as the forefront, God works in mysterious ways. Have you guys seen Kingdom of Heaven?
I have not.
You should. It's Ridley Scott. It's a movie that a guy who doesn't like religion made that is kind of, at the end, intended to make you feel like, yeah, all of this is kind of pointless. Or maybe religion is useless. Instead, it's one of the greatest religious films ever made. It shows all of the aspects of Christianity that we are supposed to value: chivalry, bravery, courage, faith, all of these different things. And it also shows the human side of things, that there is sin, and sin must be overcome, and it must be actively fought against in your soul. You yourself must fight against sin.
Yeah.
He wanted to make a movie that was about how pointless the Crusades were, and instead what he did was make a movie about how valuable Christianity is.
I see.
So I've seen this with a number of films. That's the biggest one. That's the one that comes to mind immediately. I think a lot of the time they try to subvert these stories, and they come to the realization that it's kind of hard to subvert it without totally changing it, at which point you've totally changed it and now your subversion doesn't matter. I would hope with Joan of Arc, I would hope that they do go the route of trying to make an epic story about this really interesting character from history, and that they portray her properly. I hope that he gets into the fact that she was not burned by the Catholics. She was burned by the English Catholics. The French Catholics loved her. That this was a complex issue. That one side was like, she is a prophet, and the other side was, she is a witch. I hope it goes into that, because that's the really interesting part of the story, is the way that her talking to God, so to speak, whether that's what it actually was or whether it was something else. That's the interesting part of Joan of Arc.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.